These events happened in 1985. Not sure if it was before or after my other story, Night Demon or Nightmare, but it was in the same year and does relate to it. One night, as my previous girlfriend and I were sleeping in our room, I found myself on the ceiling, an out-of-body experience, looking down at myself and my ex-partner. We were both laying on our back. My arm was extended out under her, and her head was slightly tilted, resting on my shoulder, and our heads gently conjunctured at the same point. I'll probably never get around to writing about my dream, but if I had to rate my own psychic ability, my dreams are the strongest aspect of them. The reason I say this is whilst I was on the ceiling, I was wondering if spiritually I could somehow enter my girlfriend's subconscious or dream and communicate to her, as other spirits have done with me in my dreams over the years. Just like my other story, Demon or Nightmare, when I grabbed my wife's foot from a state, looking for validation, I was attempting something similar but with much more complexity. Something, by the way, that can't be done from this plane, but at the same time, I thought I'd give it a go. I'm sure most of you reading this story are probably glad you're not married to me. I understand, but it wasn't premeditated, more of a on the spur of the moment, if that makes any sense. As I started to descend from the ceiling, I was heading in the direction of my ex-partner. Just at that point of landing on her, once again, no idea what I was trying to do, she physically jumped with a moan of discomfort, which woke up me instantly, just in time to physically hear and feel myself. The last part of her discomfort. I know it was wrong, but if I'm to be honest when sharing my experiences, it serves a better purpose to tell you the whole truth about them. If you believe in karma, then this next experience may be just what it was. My ex-partner tragically lost her then boyfriend in a car accident about 12 months prior to our relationship. I have no doubt he was hanging around her, and from all reports, he was an alright type of guy, although somewhat of the jealous type. This one night, and it was after my out-of-body experience previously explained, I was laying in bed, awake this time. My ex-partner was asleep, both of us in a similar position as mentioned before, when all of a sudden, something jumped straight into my body. I've had quite a few encounters over the years with the paranormal, but this was the most threatening and invasive of them all. An awkward, compressed, chilling feeling. I remember thinking, no you don't. Whatever it was trying to occupy my body. It lasted about 15 to 20 seconds, and when it left, a few curse words flew with whatever or whoever it was. I don't know if he was trying to possess my body or whether it was payback for my previous out-of-body experience. Not sure. I think it was him, although I can't rule out something else related to my previous story. One other thing, although I never saw him, my ex-partner did. One night, when I was out of town, she saw him standing at the end of the bed. It gave her a fright from memory. This experience was over 25 years ago, and I'm at a point in my life now where I can look back at it and others to try and rationalize possible causes. Maybe I deserved it, karma, for attempting something I shouldn't have. I should also mention, I've never taken any type of drugs, recreational or prescription, that could create this type of illusion. Out of all my experiences, this was an undeniably real event. I would only be too happy to boil it down to my imagination. If that were the case, I'll accept any criticism if you do think it's karma. This is passed on to me by my mother. She never lies, and this story haunts me. Back where she lived, it was a rural one. Greens everywhere, wildlife. I've always had a weird feeling, or always uneasy feeling inside the house I lived in. It was an old rickety house, made by the local people around the area. I've no idea how old the house is, but it's old. Well, back when my mom was a kid, she and her cousin were best friends, lived in the same house. My auntie is the most happiest, most energetic, beautiful woman. She is the type of woman that would befriend anyone. In the middle of the night, my mom woke up to pee. The house is always full of people, but this night, she was alone for the first time. There she went up the stairs to the washroom, and my auntie was sitting on the toilet. In her hand was a knife, and she was carving the sink in a circular motion. My mom said she was very scared and frightened at the moment. My auntie then said, "I'm very tired." She sounded hoarse, like a man. My mom then ran out of the house calling everybody. She had to go out and run a couple of blocks of forest to find the nearest house. The story is not told fully. She said she came back to the house and the men of the house went upstairs and took a hold of her. My mom heard thrashing, shouting, and grunting. Fast forward, they went to a spiritual person to help because she apparently was possessed by a traveling lone dwarf, and took my auntie as a host because she was always happy, making a lot of friends, and very beautiful. The spiritual man then said to bring everyone in the village, like it was some sort of ritual dinner or some sort. But the night was prepared, everyone in the village was at the house, and it was nighttime. There was grand food everywhere. I have no idea where my auntie is at the time, but my mom said that they were all grouped together or hugged in front of the house. There, a man spoke, and this is where it gets strange. The lights around them started shutting off and on. Then she heard banging, clashing, growling in the house even. The plates was being destroyed basically. Everything in that house as well. After that, my auntie was now fine. Again, my mom never lies about this stuff and would like to get an insight on what possessed auntie. I'm Odessa. I'm 22 from New Hampshire. This experience happened about a month ago, which I label the most scariest encounter of my life. And I don't exactly feel comfortable with sharing this experience with others since there are those out there who are closed-minded to these types of things. This is why I'm using this site as a place to share my experience. I was always open to the belief of spirits, but the ideas of demons and possession always seemed a bit far-fetched to me. That seemed like the kind of thing you could only see in the movies. Well, after this one long night, I look at things from a whole new perspective. Under a year ago, I became friends with Robin and Dan. They're a nice couple, a bit shy and awkward at times, but whenever I need someone to talk to or a place to go, they're there for me. They had recently took in a new roommate whom they've known for years, Cody. Cody wasn't getting along with his family, so they took him in. When I had slept over, I slept in the same room as him. He sleeps on the floor on a giant mattress, and I sleep on the futon, which is almost next to it, but there's a table between us. Robin and Dan sleep in their own room, which is out by the kitchen. The first 2 nights I slept over, I woke up during the night to hear Cody sleep whispering. It was the eeriest thing. Most of it sounded gibberish and almost like a whole other language. I didn't think much of it other than it was just some strange sounding sleep talk. Although, I had never exactly experienced anyone sound like that before. The second time I experienced it, the next morning, I did mention it to him that he makes a lot of sounds in his sleep, and he just said, "Oh, really?" and brushed it off. The third night I spent there was the last night spent with him. This time, a friend of mine was over, Kat. Robin and Dan decided to go to bed early. Kat, Cody, and I stayed up for a little bit, and then all decided to crash on the giant mattress that he usually sleeps on. I sleep on my side, facing away from them. Kat was sleeping in the middle. Throughout the night, I kept hearing the strangest noises. It was occasionally throat-clearing sounds, slight grunts, and slight movement. It took me a second to realize it was Cody's sleep talk that was going on. Again. Before I had realized that, I thought that maybe both Kat and Cody were awake, messing around next to me, which would have been really awkward, by the way. Slightly unsure, I braved myself and rolled over to see Kat sleeping. I poked her and she woke up, and we started discussing the noises coming from Cody next to us. I started giggling in relief when I mentioned that I had thought they were potentially messing around. I realized the more I talked and giggled, the louder the noises were getting from Cody. The sleep whispering started up again. Now, finding the whole aspect of sleep talkers amusing, we came up with the idea of trying to talk to him to see if he would talk back to us in his sleeping state. Biggest mistake ever. This is where it all goes downhill. So, Kat and I were trying to come up with things to say or ask. At first, she started asking him random questions, silly things like, "Hey Cody, did you run out of hot dogs?" Each time, he twitched a little bit and whispered a little more gibberish sounds. He was reacting to her voice. It started to sound creepy, but still full of innocent laughs of finding it amusing. I said, "Wow, he sounds like a demon." Cat, you should ask him if he's a demon. The second I ended that sentence, the room went cold instantly. I can't even begin to explain the dark, heavy, cold feeling that filled the room. Cody sat straight up out of his bed. His eyes rolled back into his head, and he started gagging and then snarling. Kat and I, in such a stunned state, ran straight into the bathroom and locked the door. The fear inside me didn't even sink in yet. I wasn't exactly scared yet, just shocked and confused. I kept asking, what just happened? Cody's sleep whispering started to turn into actual sleep talking. The bathroom is across the room, so I couldn't hear everything that was being said or all of the noises coming from him, but the voice I did hear didn't even sound like his, but it was clearly coming from him. It was very deep. It was like there were two different voices talking back and forth in gibberish, another language with occasionally English. I kept hearing him say, "They are still in there." Kat was really upset and started to shake and cry. I was still in my own personal state of shock and denial. It crossed my mind, could this be a joke? But there was such a cold, heavy, dark feeling. Unfortunately, I knew it wasn't, but I wanted it to be. Finally, it went quiet. We probably waited in silence for probably a total of 15 minutes, while I worked up the courage to open the door and check in on him. Kat whispered that maybe he went back to sleep since I had been quiet for a while. I had an awful feeling in my stomach, but I put my hand on the doorknob and whipped the door open extremely fast. There he was, just sitting straight up on the mattress like he was waiting for me, looking me dead straight in the eyes in the most evil, demonic grin. Even though it was dark, it was almost like he had a ghastly glow. He was the only thing that stood out in the room, looking right at me. Instant panic. I slammed the door and locked it again. Now, the fear finally sunk inside of me. I started to get teary-eyed a little bit. I started to pray inside of my head. I was praying for this all to pass over and to be kept safe. He began talking again, started off with those gibberish noises while kind of making a clicking sort of sound, and then the deeper voice came out and said, "Open the door." Then, we heard Cody's normal voice again, and it sounded like he's crying and whimpering. He starts to plead for Kat to open the door. Over and over again, he kept saying, "Kat, please, open the door. Kat, please." Kat looked at me, and she asked if she would say something back. I told her no. I said we need to just keep waiting this out. We were in there for such a long time. It must have been about 45 minutes that had passed. Throughout the whole time, I could hear Cody talking that gibberish talk from across the room as usual, but then the bathroom door started to vibrate. This is when I had enough. I knew there were two windows open in the apartment, and Dan and Robin were just a couple rooms away. I decided to scream and bang my fist on the door in hopes to get someone's attention. When I did that, instantly the dark cold feeling went away, and then I heard Cody say, "What the fuck?" Apparently, when I did that, it somehow snapped him out of his possession. I knew I was safe, but I was still hesitant to come out. We talked back and forth to him a little bit through the door. Then I finally opened the door and went and sat down to talk to him. He said his throat felt dry and that he didn't remember anything that happened. I described detail by detail everything that happened to him, which he then opened up about how he has a spirit named John attached to him. He said John has been with him for about 7 years now. He described a couple times where his ex-girlfriend, who he dated for about a year, would be afraid to sleep next to him because she'd hear him having conversations with this John in his sleep. He also explained how his mother is aware of the situation and that his grandfather used to have a spirit attached to him as well. But he assured us that John would never want him to harm anyone. I spoke up in disagreement. I told him what I felt was evil, and that I felt like it wanted to either harm or scare us badly. He seemed to start to get annoyed with me, like it offended him that I was hinting that John is actually a demon, but talking it out made everything seem a lot better. I was able to throw out a couple laughs too. I was also just relieved that everything was over. Or so I thought. I started to apologize though. Well, it wasn't a direct apology, but I explained that neither of us meant to offend him or John in any sort of way, and that if we had known about this before, then we probably wouldn't have tried to joke around when he was sleeping. The second after I ended my little apology, the room went cold again. Keep in mind, it was a really warm night. Even though there are 2 tiny windows open, it was a quiet, warm night. I looked down at my legs in shock of the coldness with that awful feeling again, and the second I look up back, I see Cody's eyes roll back again as he falls back onto the bed. Kat and I ran for the door to leave the apartment. I didn't look back, but Kat said she looked back as he watched us leave with that huge demonic grin on his face again. Kat and I were wandering the streets of town, not knowing what to do. It must have been a little after 5 a.m. at the time, and we eventually made our way over to Dunkin' Donuts to get some coffee. We sat at the table and talked about what we should do. I suggested that since there's a church right up the hill, that we would try to talk to a priest. I just wanted some reassurance, or advice, or even a prayer or anything that would help the situation become better. She looked up a number on her phone and tried to call it. Due to bad service, we couldn't understand what was being said on the other end of the phone, so we decided to walk up to the church. We sat on a bench for a little bit, and the priest, who lives right next to the church, came out and invited us inside of his home. We sat on his couch and explained everything we experienced. I felt so relieved though, as I explained everything to him, because my biggest fear was to explain something and get looked like I'm some kind of nutcase. He listened in belief and explained how a family friend of his had a similar problem, but didn't get into too much detail. I told him my fears that whatever is inside him might try to latch onto us or haunt us, and he assured us that it's Cody's own demon, and that it's his problem, not ours. He also explained that the situation becomes worse when the person doesn't recognize it as a problem. He said Cody probably views the demon as if it's his friend. I completely agreed with that statement because Cody seemed to get offended when I referred to it as a demon instead of a spirit. The priest also told us that it feeds on fears and that we should just try to keep our faith and strength, and we'll be okay. We left his house feeling a little bit better. Kat was a bit more hesitant, but I tried to work up her confidence to head back to the apartment. I told her we were going to carry on a normal conversation right as we walked through the door and as everything is fine, which is exactly what we did. I opened the door to the apartment and Cody was up and awake playing video games. We awkwardly sat down and we were just all quiet. We didn't really know what to say, and neither did he. I got on my laptop and Kat got on hers, and we were sending messages back and forth quietly. In her message, she told me not to tell Robin and Dan about the situation when they wake up, because if they hear about it, they'll probably kick Cody out and he will be homeless. I debated, but agreed not to anyway. She decided to get up and go outside for a smoke. Cody stopped playing his video game and went to his bag and got some clothes and went into the bathroom to take a shower. I was still using my laptop messaging people on Facebook. I could hear Cody making noises while in the shower. It was just slight coughing and that clearing of that throat noise again, and I started to get a weird feeling. It wasn't as bad and cold as before, but I had a gut feeling that I should just go step outside with Kat. So I did. We were outside for about 15 more minutes, and then headed back inside, and Cody was out and back to playing video games. Kat goes into the bathroom to use it, and she comes out, sits down, and messages me from her laptop again. She told me in the message that Cody's pocket knife is just randomly sitting in the sink. That instantly put a sickly, awful feeling in my stomach. She turns to Cody and asks if she can step outside and talk to him. He agrees, and they head outside. While they were still outside, Robin wakes up and comes out of her room. After the whole pocket knife thing, which I later learned he had no memory of, I completely changed my mind about being quiet about everything. I immediately told Robin about the whole thing, to which she then went and talked to Dan, and then they stepped outside with Kat and Cody. Both Robin and Dan were disturbed by it all, and agreed that they don't want Cody living with them anymore. They suggested for him to sleep at Cassie's house for now until everything gets sorted out. Cassie lives right up the road at an apartment of her own, and she is also an acquaintance of ours. Kat and I decided to spend another night at Robin's and Dan's. Around 11:30 p.m. at night, Cassie starts sending frantic texts about Cody's behavior. Apparently Cody was sitting on her couch, talking to her, and he fell back like he went to sleep, but when he sat back up, his eyes rolled back. But then he snapped out of it and carried on a normal conversation with her. She was really freaked out about it, and we had her come over to talk to us about everything. Out of fear of going back to her own apartment, she decided to sleep over with us. We were all up a good part of the night talking about what to do. We decided that it's best to try to contact Cody's family, or mother, since she's the one that's supposedly most aware of it all. The next morning, I went home and later heard they did take care of the situation and contacted Cody's mother. Now flash forward, after all of this, I had to cut off all ties and contact with Cody. Even though I did value the friendship and memories made with him in the past, I just decided it was best not to talk to him anymore because of everything bad that had happened. I still kept a friendship with everyone else, of course, but sadly, Kat found it hard to do so and continued to keep up a friendship with him up until he broke into her own apartment one night. Unsure what caused him to do so or if he was possessed, she called the police and is currently working on getting a restraining order on him. And this is where my story ends. I'm curious to hear if anyone else has had a similar experience or has heard of a similar experience. Even opinions would be interesting to hear. Another thing I found odd was how no one heard my screams or banging when Kat and I locked ourselves in the bathroom. Like I had mentioned, 2 windows are open. They live in an apartment building surrounded by other apartments. Dan and Robin were just a couple rooms away and supposedly they are light sleepers. How did no one hear me?